My heart was beating so loud I was sure David could hear it from across the room. I lay there in our king-sized bed, trying to keep my breathing steady and slow, watching through barely open eyes as my husband of 6 years carefully pried up the wooden floorboards near our bedroom window. This wasn't the David I knew. This wasn't the gentle man who brought me coffee every morning and kissed my forehead before I left for work. The person crouched on our bedroom floor moved with the precision of someone who had done this many times before. His hands worked quickly and silently, lifting each board without making a sound. What I saw next made my blood run cold. Hidden beneath our bedroom floor was a metal box about the size of a shoebox. David opened it like he was handling something precious, and even in the dim light from our hallway, I could see it was packed with papers, photographs, and what looked like several small booklets, passports, multiple passports. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump up and demand answers, but something deep in my gut told me to stay perfectly still, to keep pretending I was unconscious from whatever he had been putting in my tea. Because yes, I was right about the tea. The bitter aftertaste I'd been ignoring for weeks. The way I'd been falling into such deep sleeps that I couldn't remember anything until morning. The strange feeling that things in our house had been moved while I slept. David had been drugging me. But seeing him now, watching him flip through documents and photographs in that hidden box, I realized the sleeping pills were just the beginning. This was something much bigger and much more terrifying than I had imagined. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. Lying in my own bed, afraid of my own husband. 3 hours earlier, I had been sitting at our kitchen table, staring at the cup of chamomile tea David had just placed in front of me. It was our routine. Every night at 9, David would brew me a cup of tea while I finished up work emails or watched TV. He always used the same blue ceramic mug, always added exactly 1 teaspoon of honey, and always waited nearby until I finished drinking it. "Long day at the office?" he asked, settling into the chair across from me. His brown eyes looked concerned, caring, the same eyes that had looked at me with love on our wedding day. "Yeah, the Morrison account is giving us trouble," I replied, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. The tea smelled normal, floral, and soothing, just like always. But lately, I'd been noticing that bitter undertone, like someone had mixed medicine into it. "You should drink up and get some rest," David said, and I caught something in his voice. Was it eagerness? "You've been working too hard lately." I lifted the mug to my lips, but instead of drinking, I just pretended to take a sip. David was watching me intently, and when I didn't actually swallow, I saw a tiny frown cross his face. "Is something wrong with the tea?" he asked. "No, it's fine, just hot." I lied, taking another fake sip. This time, I let a tiny bit touch my tongue, and there it was. That bitter chemical taste that definitely didn't belong in chamomile tea. My hands started shaking slightly. After weeks of suspicion, I finally had proof that something was very wrong. "I'm going to use the bathroom," David said, standing up. "Finish your tea while I'm gone." "Okay?" The moment he left the kitchen, I rushed to the sink and poured the entire cup down the drain. Then I quickly refilled it with regular water and a tiny bit of honey to make it look like I'd been drinking. My heart was pounding as I heard David's footsteps coming back down the hallway. "All done," I said, showing him the empty mug when he returned. "Good girl," he said, and something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. "You should head to bed soon. You look tired." He was right. I did look tired. But tonight, I wasn't going to let whatever drug he'd been giving me knock me unconscious. Tonight, I was going to find out what my husband was really doing while I slept. I went through our normal bedtime routine, brushing my teeth and changing into pajamas while David watched TV downstairs. When I climbed into bed, I made sure to leave our bedroom door slightly open so I could hear him moving around the house. Around 10:30, I heard David turn off the television and walk upstairs. I quickly closed my eyes and tried to make my breathing deep and regular, the way it sounded when I was really asleep. David stood in our doorway for what felt like forever, just watching me. Then he whispered my name. "Sarah. Sarah, are you awake?" I didn't respond. I kept my breathing steady and my body completely still. He said my name louder. "Sarah." Still nothing from me. Finally, I heard him walk away, but he didn't go to bed. Instead, his footsteps went back downstairs, and I heard him moving around in his home office. For the next hour, I lay there listening to David make phone calls. I couldn't make out. Sometimes he seemed to be speaking with an accent that I didn't recognize. Around midnight, David came back upstairs. I heard him pause outside our bedroom again, then quietly pushed the door open wider. My heart was beating so fast, I was sure he could see my chest moving, but I forced myself to stay perfectly still. That's when David did something that changed everything. Instead of getting into bed beside me like he had every night for 6 years, he walked over to the window side of our room and knelt down on the floor. I heard a soft scraping sound like wood against wood, and I risked opening my eyes just a tiny bit. David was prying up the floorboards. And now here I was watching my husband, the man I loved, the man I trusted with my life, pull out a metal box filled with secrets that could destroy everything I thought I knew about him. He was holding up photographs now, and even though I couldn't see them clearly, I could tell. They were pictures of women, different women, women who weren't me. David set the photos aside and picked up one of the passport-sized booklets. He opened it and studied the page, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Using the phone's flashlight, he compared something in the passport to something on his phone screen. That's when I saw his face clearly in the light, and what I saw there terrified me more than anything else that had happened that night. David was smiling, not the warm, loving smile I knew. This was cold and calculating, the smile of someone who was very pleased with their own cleverness. It was the smile of a stranger. As I watched him carefully place everything back in the box and replace the floorboards, one thought kept running through my mind. Who was the man I married, and what had he been planning to do to me? 3 weeks earlier, I was just Sarah Mitchell, a marketing manager who thought her biggest problem was landing the Morrison account. I had no idea that my entire life was built on lies. It started on a Tuesday night in early March. I remember because I had just gotten home from a particularly stressful day at work, and David was already in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of his famous spaghetti sauce filled our little house on Maple Street, and everything felt perfectly normal. "How was your day, sweetheart?" David asked, stirring the sauce with one hand while reaching for my favorite mug with the other. Even after 6 years of marriage, he still made my tea every single night without me having to ask. "Exhausting," I said, dropping my purse by the kitchen counter. The Morrison people want to change their entire campaign strategy 3 weeks before launch. Emma and I spent 4 hours in meetings today trying to figure out how to make it work. David nodded sympathetically as he filled the kettle with water. "That sounds terrible. Good thing you have your tea to help you relax." I smiled at him. David had always been thoughtful like that, remembering the little things that made me happy. When we first started dating, he learned that I loved chamomile tea before bed, and he'd been making it for me ever since. That night, I drank my tea while we watched a movie together on the couch. David had his arm around me, and I felt safe and loved the way I always did with him. But about halfway through the movie, I started feeling incredibly drowsy. "I think I need to go to bed," I mumbled, my words feeling thick and heavy in my mouth. "Of course, honey, you've had a long day," David said, helping me up from the couch. "I'll be up in a little while." I barely remembered walking upstairs. The next thing I knew, it was morning and my alarm was going off. I felt groggy and confused, like I was waking up from the deepest sleep of my life. "Morning, beautiful," David said from beside me. He was already dressed for work, which was strange because he usually slept later than me. "What time did you come to bed?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. "Oh, around 11?" he said casually. "You were sleeping so soundly, I didn't want to wake you." Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I stumbled to the bathroom and noticed that my phone was on the nightstand, but I could have sworn I'd left it charging on the dresser and my laptop, which I always left open on the desk, was closed. "David," I called out, "did you move my stuff last night?" "What stuff?" he called back from downstairs. "My phone and laptop. They're not where I left them." "You were pretty tired, Sarah. You probably just forgot where you put them." Maybe he was right. I had been exhausted lately, working long hours on the Morrison account. It made sense that I might be more forgetful than usual. But over the next few days, it kept happening. Every night, I would drink my tea, fall into an impossibly deep sleep, and wake up feeling like I'd been unconscious rather than just asleep. And every morning, I would find small things moved around our bedroom. My purse would be in a slightly different position. My work papers would be shuffled. Once I found my laptop warm to the touch in the morning, even though I was sure I'd shut it down the night before. I think I'm losing my mind, I told my best friend, Emma, during lunch the following week. We were sitting in our usual spot at the little cafe near our office, and I was picking at my salad while trying to explain the strange feelings I'd been having. "What do you mean?" Emma asked, her dark eyes full of concern. "I keep thinking someone's been going through my stuff while I sleep, but that's crazy, right? It's just David and me in the house." Emma frowned. "That doesn't sound crazy to me. What kind of stuff?" "My laptop, my purse, work documents, little things. And I've been sleeping so deeply lately that I don't remember anything from the time I go to bed until my alarm goes off." "How deeply?" "I thought about it. Like David could probably set off fireworks in our bedroom and I wouldn't wake up. It's not normal, Emma. I've never been that heavy of a sleeper." Emma sat down her sandwich and looked at me seriously. "Sarah, when did this start?" "About 3 weeks ago. Right around the time I started working on the Morrison account. And you're sure nothing else has changed? No new medications? No changes in your routine?" I shook my head, then stopped. "Well, David has been making my tea every night, but he's always done that. It's not new." Something flickered across Emma's face, but she didn't say anything right away. "What?" I asked. "Probably nothing," she said carefully. "But maybe you should pay attention to how you feel after drinking the tea, just to rule out any allergies or anything like that." That night, I did pay attention. I noticed that the tea tasted slightly different than usual. There was a bitter undertone that I'd been ignoring. And within 30 minutes of finishing the cup, I felt like I could barely keep my eyes open. But the most disturbing thing happened around 2 in the morning. I woke up briefly, just for a few seconds, and I could have sworn I heard David's voice coming from downstairs. He was talking to someone, but his voice sounded different, sharper, more serious than I'd ever heard it. When I woke up the next morning, I asked him about it. "Were you on the phone last night?" David looked surprised. "No. Why? I thought I heard you talking to someone." "You must have been dreaming, sweetheart. I came to bed right after you did." But I knew what I'd heard, and for the first time in our 6-year marriage, I was starting to wonder if my husband was lying to me. The idea came to me during another sleepless lunch with Emma. We were back at our usual cafe, but this time I could barely eat anything. My stomach was twisted in knots from 2 weeks of growing suspicion about David. "I need to know for sure," I told Emma, pushing my untouched sandwich around my plate. "I can't keep living like this, wondering if I'm going crazy or if something really is happening." Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice. "What are you thinking?" "I want to record myself sleeping, set up my phone to film the bedroom, and see what happens after I drink the tea." "Sarah," that's Emma paused, considering. "Actually, that's really smart. If nothing happens, you'll know you're just stressed and maybe you can get some help for the insomnia. But if something is happening, then I'll have proof." I finished. That evening, I felt like I was preparing for the most important performance of my life. I set my phone up on the dresser, angled so it could capture most of our bedroom. I made sure it was plugged in so the battery wouldn't die, and I started recording just before David brought up my tea. "Here you go, honey," he said, handing me the familiar blue mug. "Extra honey tonight. You look like you need it." I forced myself to smile and drink the tea normally, even though every sip of that bitter liquid made me want to gag. Within 20 minutes, the familiar, heavy drowsiness began pulling at my eyelids. "I'm so tired," I mumbled, which wasn't acting at all. "Sleep well, sweetheart," David said, kissing my forehead. "I'll be up soon." The last thing I remembered was David turning off the bedroom light. When I woke up the next morning, David was already gone. He'd left a note saying he had an early meeting and would be back that afternoon. My hands shook as I stopped the recording on my phone and saw that it had captured over 8 hours of footage. I fast-forwarded through the first hour, watching myself toss and turn before finally going completely still. Then, around midnight, David appeared in the frame. What I saw made my blood run cold. David didn't just come to bed like he'd been telling me. Instead, he stood over me for several minutes, saying my name and even shaking my shoulder gently. When I didn't respond at all, he smiled. That same cold smile I would later see when he opened his secret box. Then David left the room, and I watched myself lying there like a corpse for another hour before he returned. This time he was carrying my purse. I watched in horror as my husband sat on the edge of our bed and went through every item in my purse. He photographed my driver's license with his phone. He wrote down information from my credit cards. He even opened my work badge and took pictures of both sides. But that wasn't the worst part. After going through my purse, David walked over to my laptop on the desk. I watched him open it. Somehow he knew my password and spent nearly an hour going through my files. He took pictures of documents from work, copied information from my email, and even accessed my online banking. The whole time I lay there completely unconscious, totally helpless, while my husband violated every aspect of my privacy. Around 3 a.m, David made a phone call. He spoke quietly, but my phone had picked up some of the audio. I turned the volume all the way up and listened carefully. The timeline is still good. David was saying I should have everything I need within the next 2 weeks. No, she doesn't suspect anything. The medication is working perfectly. Yes, I understand the risks, but this one is different. She has access to more resources than the others. The others? What others? David's voice continued, but he was speaking so quietly that I couldn't make out the rest of the conversation. When he hung up, he put everything back exactly where he'd found it, kissed my forehead again, and went to sleep beside me like nothing had happened. I sat on my bed that morning staring at my phone screen, feeling like my entire world had collapsed. The man I'd been married to for 6 years, the man I loved and trusted completely, had been systematically gathering my personal information while keeping me unconscious with some kind of drug. But why? What was he planning to do with my credit card numbers and work documents? And who were the others he'd mentioned on the phone? I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? That my husband looked through my purse, that he used my laptop. Technically, we were married. Wasn't my stuff his stuff too? No, I needed more information before I could go to the authorities. I needed to understand what David was really planning. I called Emma and asked her to meet me for coffee during her lunch break. I have the recording. I told her the moment she sat down. And Emma, it's bad. It's really, really bad. I showed her the footage on my phone, watching her face grow pale as she saw David going through my belongings. Sarah, this isn't just weird behavior, Emma said when the video ended. This is criminal. He's drugging you and stealing your personal information. But why? What could he possibly want with my credit card numbers? He has access to all our accounts anyway. Emma was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her mind working. Sarah, she said finally, I think you need to consider the possibility that David isn't who you think he is. Emma didn't waste any time. The morning after I showed her the recording, she called in sick to work and spent the entire day digging into David's background. What she found made everything so much worse. We need to meet somewhere private, Emma said when she called me that afternoon. Her voice sounded shaky, which scared me because Emma was never shaky about anything. Can you get away from the house? I told David I was going grocery shopping and met Emma at Riverside Park about 20 minutes from our neighborhood. She was sitting on a bench overlooking the Willow River, holding a thick folder in her lap. Sarah, sit down, she said when she saw me approaching. What I'm about to tell you is going to be really hard to hear. My legs felt weak as I sat beside her. What did you find? Emma opened the folder and pulled out several printed pages. I started with the basics. David's employment history, his social security number, his college records, things that should be easy to verify for someone you've been married to for 6 years. She handed me the first page. It was a printout from the website of Cascade Software Solutions, the company where David claimed to work. I called them this morning and asked to speak with David Mitchell in their development department, Emma said. They told me they've never had an employee by that name. I stared at the page confused. That's impossible. David goes to work every day. He gets paychecks. He talks about his coworkers. I know this is hard, but keep listening, Emma said gently. I also ran a background check using one of those online services. Sarah, David's social security number doesn't match his name in the government database. She showed me another printout. And look at this. I searched for David Mitchell on every social media platform I could think of. His Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn profiles all show the same thing. They were all created 7 years ago. Not updated 7 years ago. Created 7 years ago. My hands were trembling as I looked at the evidence. 7 years ago, but we met 8 years ago. Exactly. Which means David created his entire online identity 1 year before he met you. Sarah, I don't think David Mitchell is even his real name. I felt like I was going to be sick. That can't be right. We have a marriage certificate. We filed taxes together. How could he fake all of that? Emma pulled out more papers. Identity theft is more common than you think, especially when someone has the right skills and resources. Look at this. She showed me a printout from the Oregon Department of Motor Vehicles. I had my cousin, who works at the DMV, look up David's driver's license. The photo matches the man you married, but the license was issued 7 years ago as a replacement for a lost license. There's no record of David Mitchell having a license in Oregon before that date. What about other states? I checked. No David Mitchell matching his description or approximate age has ever held a driver's license in Washington, California, Idaho, or Nevada. It's like he didn't exist before 7 years ago. I was having trouble breathing. Emma, what are you saying? I'm saying that the man you married has been living under a false identity since before he met you. And based on that phone call you recorded, I don't think you're his first victim. The word victim hit me like a physical blow. Victim of what? Emma hesitated, then pulled out one more piece of paper. I also did some research on marriage fraud and identity theft. Sarah, there are organized groups that target successful women. Marry them, steal their identities and assets, then disappear. The FBI calls them romance scammers. But they're really much more sophisticated than that. She pointed to an article she'd printed from the FBI's website. Look at this pattern. They create false identities, spend months or years building relationships with their targets, then systematically gather personal information while keeping their victims unaware of what's happening. The sleeping pills, I whispered. Exactly. It's the perfect way to access everything they need without the victim knowing. Bank account information, social security numbers, work credentials, family contacts, everything someone would need to completely steal another person's life. I thought about David's phone call, about him mentioning the others, and talking about a timeline. Emma, do you think he's done this before? I think it's very possible. And Sarah, I think you might be in serious danger. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the river flow past while I tried to process everything Emma had told me. My entire marriage was a lie. The man I loved didn't even exist. What do I do? I finally asked. First, we're going to the police. This is way beyond what we can handle on our own. But what if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm just a paranoid wife? Emma squeezed my hand. You have evidence, Sarah. The recording, the background check, all of this research. And if David really is planning something, we need law enforcement involved before it's too late. Too late for what? Emma's expression was grim. I don't know. But people who go to this much trouble to steal identities usually aren't planning to just walk away quietly. They're planning to disappear completely. And they can't afford to leave witnesses behind. The implications of what she was saying hit me like a truck. David wasn't just stealing my identity. He might be planning to kill me. There's something else, Emma said quietly. Tonight, I think you should test him one more time. But this time, we're going to be ready for whatever he does. That evening, Emma parked her car 3 blocks away from our house and walked through the woods behind our neighborhood to position herself where she could see our bedroom window. We had agreed on a signal. If I was in immediate danger, I would turn my bedside lamp on and off 3 times. Detective James Parker, whom Emma had contacted that afternoon, was skeptical, but agreed to have a patrol car in the area. We'll need concrete evidence of a crime before we can make an arrest, he had told us, but if your husband is really planning something, tonight might give us what we need. I went through my normal evening routine, trying to act natural while my heart pounded in my chest. David seemed more relaxed than usual, almost cheerful as he prepared dinner and asked about my day. You seem happy tonight, I observed, watching him. While he cooked. Just thinking about the future, he said with that smile that now made my skin crawl. I have a feeling things are going to change for us very soon. When 9:00 came, David brought me my tea right on schedule. I had practiced this moment all afternoon. How to fake drinking while actually letting the liquid pool in my cheeks, then swallowing just enough to taste bitter, but not enough to knock me unconscious. "Drink up, sweetheart," David said, watching me more intently than usual. "You're going to need your rest." Something about the way he said it sent chills down my spine. I pretended to drink the tea while David sat across from me, and I noticed he kept checking his watch. "I'm feeling tired already," I said after a few minutes, which wasn't entirely acting. Even the small amount I'd swallowed was making me drowsy. "Good," David said, and there was something different in his voice, something final. "Why don't you head up to bed? I'll be up in a little while." I went upstairs and got into bed, leaving our door slightly open just like the night before. But this time, I fought against the drowsiness, pinching myself and biting my tongue to stay conscious. Around 11:30, I heard David's footsteps on the stairs. He stood in our doorway for a long time, then called my name several times. When I didn't respond, he approached the bed and actually lifted my eyelid to check if I was unconscious. Satisfied that I was asleep, David left the room. But instead of going to his office like before, I heard him go into our guest room. There was the sound of something heavy being moved. Then David's footsteps returned to our bedroom. What happened next was even more terrifying than I had imagined. David walked straight to the window and began prying up the floorboards, just like I would witness 3 weeks later. But this time, I could see everything clearly as he opened that metal box. The first thing he pulled out was a thick stack of cash, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. Then came the passports, and I could see there were at least 5 of them, all with David's photo, but different names. But it was the photographs that made me want to scream. David spread out a collection of pictures on our bedroom floor, and I could see they were photos of women, different women, all around my age, all with dark hair like mine. Some of the photos looked like they had been taken without the women knowing. Shots of them leaving work, getting into cars, walking into houses. One photo made my blood freeze. It was a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Local Woman Missing." The photo showed a smiling brunette named Jennifer Walsh from Seattle. According to the article, she had disappeared without a trace 2 years ago, leaving behind a successful marketing career and a house that was later found cleaned out of all valuables. David picked up his phone and made a call, speaking in that strange accent I'd heard before. "Everything is on schedule," he said quietly. "The accounts are ready for transfer, and I've got all the documentation I need." "Yes, I understand the timeline. The flight is booked for Thursday. No, there won't be any loose ends this time. I've learned from the mistakes in Seattle, where Jennifer Walsh had disappeared." David continued talking, and I caught fragments that made my heart race. "The house will be cleaned out by Wednesday. Make it look like she left voluntarily. New identity is already established in Portland." Portland. He was planning to do this. Again in my city to another woman, but first he had to get rid of me. David ended the call and pulled out what looked like airline tickets. Even from across the room, I could see they were one-way tickets to somewhere international, dated for Thursday, just 3 days away. Then David did something that confirmed my worst fears. He pulled out a small glass vial filled with clear liquid and a syringe. "Sorry, Sarah," he whispered to my supposedly unconscious form, "but you've served your purpose. Thursday morning, you're going to have a very unfortunate accident." I lay frozen in terror as David carefully placed the vial and syringe back in the box. My mind was racing. Thursday morning was only 2 days away. Whatever David was planning, I was running out of time. After David replaced the floorboards and went to bed, I waited until I heard his steady breathing before carefully reaching for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type the text message to Emma. "Call Detective Parker now. David has poison planning to kill me Thursday." I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time David shifted in bed beside me, I wondered if he had changed his mind about waiting until Thursday. When morning came, I had to pretend everything was normal while my husband, my would-be killer, made me coffee and kissed me goodbye. "I'll be working late tonight," David said as he headed for the door. "Don't wait up for me." The moment his car pulled out of our driveway, Emma and Detective Parker were at my front door. "Show me everything," Detective Parker said without wasting time on pleasantries. I led them upstairs to our bedroom and pointed to the area near the window. "The floorboard's right there. He hides everything underneath." Detective Parker knelt down and carefully pried up the boards, revealing the metal box exactly where I knew it would be. When he opened it, even he looked shocked at what we found. Jesus, he muttered, pulling out the stack of cash. There's gotta be $20,000 here. But it was the other contents that really got his attention. Along with the fake passports and photographs of women, there were detailed files on each victim. Jennifer Walsh from Seattle was there along with 3 other women from different cities. Lisa Chen from San Francisco, Maria Rodriguez from Phoenix, and Amanda Foster from Denver. Look at this, Detective Parker said, holding up a folder with my name on it. Inside was everything. Copies of my birth certificate, social security card, bank account information, work credentials, even photos of me that I'd never seen before. He's been planning this for months, Emma said, looking through the papers. Maybe longer. Detective Parker found something else that made my stomach drop. A detailed timeline written in David's handwriting. It outlined his entire plan from establishing trust through asset transfer to something labeled Final Cleanup Thursday. We need to catch him in the act, Detective Parker said. Sarah, I know this is terrifying, but we need you to confront him tonight. Well, wire you up and have officers positioned around the house. What if he tries to kill me early? I asked. We won't let that happen. The moment he makes any threatening move, we'll be there. That evening felt like the longest of my life. Detective Parker had hidden tiny microphones in my clothes and positioned officers in unmarked cars throughout our neighborhood. Emma was in a van down the street monitoring everything. David came home around 8 to us carrying takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. I thought we could have a nice dinner together, he said, seeming more relaxed than I'd seen him in weeks. Just the 2 of us. We ate in relative silence, and I could barely taste the food. David kept checking his watch and seemed excited about something. David, I said finally, I need to ask you something. Of course, sweetheart. What is it? I took a deep breath. I know about the sleeping pills. David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. For just a second, his mask slipped, and I saw something cold and dangerous flash in his eyes. I don't know what you mean, he said carefully. The bitter taste in my tea. The way I've been sleeping so deeply. I know you've been drugging me. David set down his fork and studied my face. Sarah, you've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe you should see a doctor. I already have proof, I said, pulling out my phone. I recorded you going through my things while I was unconscious. This time, David's expression changed completely. The loving husband disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't recognize at all. You recorded me? His voice was different now, harder, with traces of that accent I'd heard during his phone calls. I know about the fake passports, David. I know about Jennifer Walsh and the other women. I know you're planning to kill me on Thursday. David stood up slowly, his hands clenched into fists. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Sarah. Then tell me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tell me who you really are. David laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to know who I am? I'm someone who's very good at what I do. And what I do is take everything from women like you. Your money, your identity, your life, and then I disappear. How many women have you killed? Enough, David said coldly. And you were going to be the last one. I was planning to retire after this job, but now he started walking toward me, and I could see the calculation in his eyes. Now I'm going to have to improvise. David took another step toward me, and I could see him reaching into his pocket. That's when Detective Parker's voice crackled through the hidden speakers the police had placed around our house. David Mitchell, or whoever you really are, this is the Portland Police Department. The house is surrounded. Step away from Sarah and put your hands where we can see them. David froze, his hand still in his pocket. For a moment, confusion crossed his face as he looked around our dining room, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. You set me up, he said, turning back to me with pure hatred in his eyes. I protected myself, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Something you never gave Jennifer Walsh or the others a chance to do. The front door burst open, and Detective Parker rushed in with 3 other officers, their guns drawn. Hands up now! David slowly raised his hands, but I could see him, calculating, looking for an escape route. You have nothing on me, he said calmly. I'm Sarah's husband. We were just having a conversation. We have everything on you, Detective Parker said, keeping his weapon trained on David. The fake passports, the stolen identities, the detailed plans to murder your wife. And thanks to the wire she's wearing, we just heard you confess to multiple murders. That's when David made his move. He suddenly lunged toward the back door, but Officer Martinez was already there, blocking his path. David spun around and tried to run toward the stairs, but Detective Parker tackled him before he could reach them. "Let me go!" David shouted as they handcuffed him, and for the first time, I heard his real accent clearly. It sounded Eastern European, maybe Russian. "You don't understand what you're dealing with? We understand perfectly." Detective Parker said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, identity theft, fraud, and we're going to be adding a lot more charges once we finish investigating your other victims." As they led David away, he turned back to look at me one last time. "This isn't over, Sarah. People like me, we have friends, we have resources. You'll never be safe." "Yes, she will," Detective Parker said firmly, "because people like you always make the same mistake. You think you're smarter than everyone else, but you're not. You're just criminals, and criminals get caught." The next few hours were a blur of police interviews, evidence collection, and phone calls. Emma stayed with me the entire time, holding my hand while I gave my statement and answered what felt like hundreds of questions. Detective Parker told me that David's real name was Victor Petro, and he was wanted by the FBI in connection with at least 6 similar cases across the country. The women I'd seen in those photographs weren't just victims. They were all dead, killed after Victor had stolen their identities and drained their bank accounts. "You saved your own life tonight," Detective Parker told me, "but you also helped us catch someone who's been destroying families for over a decade." The trial took 8 months. Victor tried to claim that he was just a con artist, not a killer, but the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had found bodies in 3 different states, all women who had been married to Victor under different names. The poison in that vial matched the substance found in Jennifer Walsh's system when her body was finally discovered in a lake outside Seattle. Victor was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I moved to San Diego 6 months after the trial ended. I couldn't stay in Portland, couldn't live in that house where I'd discovered that my entire marriage was a lie. Emma helped me pack, and we drove down the coast together, stopping at every scenic overlook to take pictures and remind ourselves that the world was still beautiful. It took 2 years of therapy before I could sleep through the night without nightmares. It took 3 years before I could drink tea again. And it took 4 years before I was ready to trust another person enough to go on a date. But I survived. And more importantly, I learned that I was stronger than I ever knew. Today, I work with the FBI's Victim Services Division, helping other women who've been targeted by romance scammers and identity thieves. I share my story at conferences and support groups. And I've helped catch 3 other criminals who were using Victor's methods. Sometimes people ask me if I regret marrying Victor, if I wish I'd never met him. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain and the fear, but I don't regret becoming the person I am now. I'm stronger, more aware, and more determined to help others than I ever was before. Victor was wrong about one thing. This story was over the moment those handcuffs click shut. He's spending the rest of his life in a concrete cell while I'm living freely, helping other women reclaim their lives.